And so people are now putting in place policies to govern what sort of service is deployed in which type of geography or in which cloud provider and things like that. That feeds on to our next chart, which actually says that the whole legal jurisdictional side of things on those contracts and where the suppliers are headquartered is becoming a factor. Does that correspond with what you're seeing when you're speaking with people?
Oh, yes. In particular in Europe, obviously. As you all know, we know this is something that customers in Europe are very aware of, and more so. So this is not so much about the location of the data. This is actually in under which jurisdiction your data or your processes or your workflows are being are being handled, and there are differences clearly between what's happening with the various markets, what's happening with Europe with GDPR, obviously, what's happening in the US with the Cloud Act, what's happening in China with, there is no name for it, but we all understand what that could mean. So clearly, customers want to have a better control or a better handle or a better understanding or better visibility on where their data are, that's for sure, but also what kind of where is the company headquartered, what kind of jurisdiction they belong to, what could happen to their data. This is something that has been quite an issue in the press, quite an issue with governments, quite an issue with large companies, quite an issue with critical infrastructure providers, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is certainly top of mind.
And that sort of translates into the next result that we got from the survey, which shows that this is actually influencing where the sorts of providers that people look to get in to help their business and when they're looking to deploy new services. Will we be using a different mix of providers? Way more than half, 2/3, 70% almost, either strongly agree with this, agree, or they may be neutral, unsure, so willing to change. It's a much smaller proportion that disagree with that. So how are people talking to you about this? Are they explicitly asking you about the headquarters and which jurisdiction they would be subject to if there was any dispute, or if there was any external pressures upon them?
Yeah, interestingly enough, yes, this is an issue that is coming up in conversation with customers. And in the case of OVHcloud, we've been pretty transparent about it. We've actually set up the company and the governance of the company in legal terms in such a way that yes, we do have a presence in the US, but we have a separated company, fully, self-contained, I would say. Mm-hmm. Operational standpoint, the same thing is true for Europe and in a few other countries. So we take those issues very seriously. But when we talk about contract terms, I also don't want to only associate that with jurisdiction. There are a number of other things in the contract terms that people are, take care of. In terms of transparency, in terms of security, in terms of location of data, in terms of location of contracts, in terms of the way billing is handled, right, by the various subsidiaries and so on and so forth. So there are all set of things that customers are experiencing and are paying attention to. And this is clearly an important factor. The other important factor that also coming up very, very often with customers is actually the cost transparency. What customer wants is not necessarily a better price. Obviously, everybody wants to pay less. There's no question about that. But they want to avoid surprises, right? They want to make sure that at the beginning of the month, they know what they're going to pay for what they consume. And at the end of the month, their bill is actually in line with the purchase order, right? So this is as simple as that. So the cost transparency as well as the simplicity of the services. It's in order to be transparent, you need to be simple. If you have a very complex model, despite the fact that you claim transparency, you are opaque. And so this is something that we've been trying to avoid as much as possible. We try to have very simple business models, very simple services, try to eliminate anything that would come at the end, right? Such as, traffic charges, such as, provision anti-DDoS. All those kinds of things that you don't really control, or a number or call or charging by API calls,
Mm-hmm.
controlling that? Nobody really. So we try to eliminate any of that so that to make sure that the cost is transparent and the service is simple to understand.